Hello, and welcome to a new series I'm trying, where I recap the month that just happened by talking about something that I've been watching, listening, and reading to. I'm not sold on a title, but I think I'll call it Watch, Listen, Read. I think that's gonna get the gist of it. January 2022, new year, new me? Well, not really, but it was a good month, all things considered. I had kind of a hectic November and December, so going into January, where I had some time off and, just not as much stuff going on, I was able to relax a bit, unwind a little bit. I started the year off with a High School Musical marathon, which was a great decision, and I feel like I've entered into the new year with a very grounded mindset. But enough of that general stuff. Let's talk about what I've been watching, listening, and reading to in the month of January in the year of our Lord 2022. I always use January as kind of my catch-up month to watch all these movies that I had missed out on in the previous year. I especially use it to catch up on documentaries and foreign films, and there are a lot of smaller movies that tend to get some theater play, so I'm able to go see those. That all being said, I'm not going to talk about a movie this month, even though I very easily could have. I've watched a lot of great movies. Instead, I want to focus in on a television show called Maya and the Three, an animated limited series on Netflix by Jorge R. Gutierrez. The titular character, Maya, is a warrior princess from the fantastical kingdom of Tekka, which is one of the four kingdoms that makes up kind of this world that is a exploration and composite of South American mythology. And the story is all about her going on a quest to gain allies and eventually defeat the god of war. It is very much a episodic quest that kind of falls into the same mythic family as, let's say, the Odyssey or Journey to the West. And of course, with all of this mythology piled on top of the show that just has some fun animation, good action, great character designs, and kind of a tone that fits with like late Disney Renaissance, I really enjoyed the show. Unsurprisingly. I do think one of the standouts is the action. There's a lot of fight scenes here, but they always are kind of clever, and all the characters have their different styles of action, which help diversify everything. They also do a lot of fun stuff with the aspect ratio in the animation, which keeps everything fresh. And there's a really good voice cast with people like Rita Monroe or Diego Luna or Alfred Molina, but the standout is the lead performance by Zoe Saldana as Maya. And I feel like being able to voice this character unlocks a certain amount of personality that's oftentimes kind of stripped away when Zoe Saldana is doing her live action work. It's not a perfect series. They often introduce and then resolve conflicts a little too quickly. The pacing kind of feels like it's supposed to be a movie and not a 9-episode series, but it all works out at the end. It also suffers from everyone has to have a love interest-itis, which is very frustrating to me. But ultimately just a fun show that I could sit down and watch at the end of the day, just kind of unwind, and that tickled the mythological part of my brain. As for something I've been listening to this month, I listen to a lot of podcasts at work. Like a lot. And I listen on 2x speed, so I get through them very quickly, which means I also start podcasts all the time. However, it's very rare that once I start something, I just power through it to completion. But when I discovered the newest Olympian, that's what I did. This is a podcast by Mike Schubert where he reads through the Percy Jackson books for the first time as an adult to see if it is the YA series that everyone's been sleeping on. I don't know quite who he's talking about with everyone, seeing how they are wildly successful books, but at least he's been sleeping on. And it's really fun to revisit that series with his commentary on top of it. Unfortunately, he's only gotten through the first book, so there's not a lot to listen to. Luckily, he did another podcast called Potterless, where he does the same thing but with Harry Potter. Now, I haven't finished Potterless. I've only listened to the 80 or so episodes that it takes for him to get through the books. However, I really also enjoyed seeing how he grew, one as a podcaster, but also how he grew to love the Harry Potter series through that. And something he brings to both of these series is that he's not afraid to be critical of them. Not just in like being like, oh, this is a plot hole, blah, 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 but actually examining patterns that he notices throughout the books that may have been lost on people who have read them countless times from their childhood, like whether or not the ADHD representation is actually accurate or good or helpful in the Percy Jackson books, and why on earth J.K. Rowling writes so much fat phobia in her books. And especially for someone like me who has kind of complicated feelings about returning to the world of Harry Potter, this was actually a very good way to do that while having separation from J.K. Rowling. So yeah, newest Olympian, Potterless, both very good companion podcasts that I have enjoyed immensely. And if you are a fan of either of those series or you're just kind of curious about them, then I definitely recommend giving that podcast a shot. And finally, what have I been reading this month? I have a podcast called The All New 52, where me and my roommate sit down and we talk about comics. And one of the comics that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but just haven't had a physical copy of, is Kingdom Come. But now I have a physical copy, and I've read it and really enjoy it. And I'm actually having to read it through a second time for that episode. It's good enough that right when I got done with it, I hopped back in. Kingdom Come is an Elseworld story from 1996, written by Mark Waid and drawn by Alex Ross. And it's a story that kind of touches on a bunch of different themes, but in general, I would say it's about the relationship between humans and superhumans within the later days of the DC universe, backdropped against Revelations and Ragnarok. However, what Waid and Ross are able to do with that is that they're then able to turn that into an exploration of what it means to relate to these characters that have become paragons of our culture. I've always resisted calling superheroes the modern day mythology. However, if you are to explore it that way, there's very few ways you could do it as well as how Waid and Ross do it in Kingdom Come. Telling the story through the eyes of a common man going on a journey with this character called the Spectre, who is kind of this otherworldly angelic figure, and seeing the events of this alternate future to the DC universe explored through the lens of both a person who is solely human and a person who is detached from humanity. It's also a story where there is no right and wrong, or more accurately, everyone's wrong. It's very much a story about a world where these black and white visions of justice and truth have been lost. And the characters are therefore having to figure out how to navigate that world, and they're all making mistakes. And it's all kind of circles back to what I would say the central characteristic of Superman's character is, which is hope. And that even in this broken world at the brink of destruction, hope can bring people back. And as I often find with stories like this that kind of try to tackle the inevitability of an oncoming threat, I related to it just on the sense of, oh, we're living in a world that's slowly being destroyed by us. And so I feel like even though this was written in the mid-90s, it still carries through a lot of relevance into the modern day. So that is what I have been watching, listening, and reading to in the month of January. I am hopeful for 2022. Maybe it's just because I read Kingdom Come, but after 2 long and hard years, I feel like I am entering into this next year with a little bit more of tempered expectations, but also a readiness to do and embrace good in the world. And I hope that y'all are having a good 2022 so far as well. It's good to be making videos again. I will see you next month.